guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be going over basically how to understand a scientific study. I'm going to break it down bit by bit so people that are watching this can understand what they need to do to be able to interpret if the study they've been sent or the reading is actually worth anything. So the question is, can science be wrong? I'd say yes, and I've got some reasons why. So I'm going to try and show you my screen. So if we look here, we can see that it's a study on carbohydrate quality, whatever that means. Series of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So a study of studies, and it's it's an article review sort of thing. We've got a few different people here. These are just the authors, affiliations. This is going to be universities and anything related to that. Usually a lot of research centers. So the next thing is, well, what I like to do at the start is often look at the conflicts of interest. If we scroll down, just World Health Organization, Health Research Council, things like that. So it's usually the same sort of figures you'll see in that, depending on what sort of study it is, especially a larger sort of broad study like this. So the next, let's look at the methodology. So did a series of systematic reviews and meta-analyses of prospective studies published from database inception. It's basically what they've done is looked at broad data, they're talking about like chronic disease, weight loss. They're just looking at a lot of different things in this, basically. Grade approach, that's good. So yeah, so we look at that and we've got to assess, did they use suitable methods to identify what they're trying to find out. So like, what's interesting is when we look at this sort of thing is we need to know, was it a randomized clinical trial? What were they looking at? Was it a lock-in ward study, like in a metabolic ward? Is it in vitro? Is it in a lab? That might underpin biological mechanisms, maybe. Is the study relevant to humans or just rodents or other animals? That can play quite a big factor in whether it excludes, this research in regards to human health. In relation to exercise science, they sort of put all these studies out and they'll say, this study said this about these people that were training. Well, were they novices? Were they experienced lifters? Were they using performance-enhancing drugs? How relevant is that to you? So you've got to assess that for yourself. Do you think there's any credence to what they're saying? There's a lot of things to identify here in the study. So we look at the conclusions. I think it's kind of like the findings, interpretation. It's basically an overview. Findings from prospective studies of clinical trials associated with relatively high intakes of dietary fiber and whole grains were complementary. So relatively high, not very specific. Maybe they've outlined that in the study, but they should have probably mentioned that there. I don't know. Dietary fiber and whole grains were complementary. Right. So how valuable is this? Well, if we look at the author, or one of them, first author, usually the primary researcher, that's Andrew Reynolds. The thing is, what we'll also find with him is if we look onto his LinkedIn page, I did this all myself earlier, obviously. Just out of interest, I just picked a study. This came up. Andrew Reynolds, so senior director scientist, so important person, AstraZeneca. It's crazy, really. So then you've got to look at this one, dietary fiber and probiotics. So I'm going down the fiber route here because I find it quite amazing that some people feel that these studies are useful. It's really not the case. They've got a ton of authors in this and research, Christ. There we go. Conflict of interest statement. So who have we got here? We've got loads of people that I can't even mention what. I mean, get on here, AstraZeneca. They're trying to say fiber is good. So what do AstraZeneca say about different diets? And you can find this out for yourself, but they do have a bias, a confirmation bias towards dietary fiber, the cereal industry. I won't name too many names because you know who they are. It's quite obvious. So next thing is like what does the studies inform on? So what does it say here? Higher dietary fiber was associated, keyword, with significantly improved progression-free survival in 128 patients. So 128, quite a small group, but I mean, it is probably a well-regulated study, so it might be why it's a smaller group. Associated, as mentioned earlier, the key word. So association doesn't inform on risk. So this wasn't a cause and effect study. There's too many confounding variables. Barkay would say, for example, there's data to suggest that ice cream sales and the consumption is linked to shark attacks. Is it that it makes you taste better to the sharks? That's quite a good point. I find that quite funny. The question to ask yourself when looking at a study is, does the study inform of risk through cause and effect, or is it just mere coincidental observation? When looking at scientific papers, we have to be critical here. So following different advice based on speculative ideas isn't sensible. It can actually damage some people. So that's why I'm quite careful about the advice and information I give out. It could really harm someone. I try not to often, or if at all, say things wrong. Getting back to the paper, I can't really agree with the research here. It seems it's generalization. It doesn't inform on risk. It's just association. And the thing is, as well, there's probably thousands or even millions of people over the world that have reported online that they've reduced their fiber intake and their IBS, Crohn's, digestive disorders in general. The symptoms have decreased. So when we're looking at this sort of science, it really makes us question the science. Is there much truth to it? I can't really agree there. Anyway, the key point here is there's lots of factors to key in when you're assessing the validity of different studies you're looking at. Just be a bit more careful about it all. And I hope that's informative, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.